The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as James Mitchell adjusted his red tunic for the 100th time that week. At 28 years old, he had been serving as a Queen's Guard for 6 years, standing motionless for hours outside the royal residences. His black bearskin hat sat perfectly straight, his polished boots reflected the early sunlight, and his face remained expressionless despite the growing crowd of tourists gathering nearby. James had always dreamed of this job since he was a young boy growing up in a small village in Yorkshire. His grandfather had served in the Royal Navy, and his father worked as a security guard at a local factory. When James announced he wanted to join the Queen's Guard, his family thought he was reaching too high. But James was determined. He spent years training, passed every test, and finally earned his place among the elite guards who protected the British royal family. Stand-in guard wasn't as glamorous as people thought. The uniform weighed nearly 40 pounds, and during summer months, the thick wool fabric felt like wearing a portable sauna. James had fainted twice during his first year, but he never gave up. He learned to control his breathing, to ignore the pain in his feet after standing for 4 hours straight, and to maintain his composure, even when tourists tried to make him laugh or react. Today felt different somehow. James noticed more security personnel than usual walking around the castle grounds. There were men in expensive suits speaking quietly into their phones, and several black cars with tinted windows had arrived earlier that morning. He wondered if there was a special event planned, but as a guard, wasn't always informed about every detail of royal activities as the day progressed. James watched the usual parade of tourists, taking photos and trying to get his attention. A little girl waved at him from behind the rope barrier, and though he couldn't respond, he felt a warm feeling inside. This was why he loved his job despite the challenges. He was protecting something important, something that represented centuries of British history and tradition. Around noon, a man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit approached the guard station. He was tall, with graying hair and an air of confidence that suggested he was used to being in charge. James had seen many important people during his service, but there was something different about this visitor. The man stopped directly in front of James and studied him carefully, as if he was evaluating something. "Impressive dedication," the man said quietly, though James couldn't respond or even acknowledge that he had heard. "I've been watching you for the past hour. Not once. Did you move? Not even when that child was crying right next to you?" James felt curious about this stranger, but his training kept him perfectly still. The man continued to observe him, taking notes on a small device. After several minutes, the visitor walked away, but James noticed he didn't leave the castle grounds. Instead, he seemed to be conducting some kind of inspection, speaking with other security personnel and pointing in James's direction several times. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors to the castle. James noticed several people with cameras, but they weren't tourists. They moved with purpose and seemed to be documenting something specific. One of them set up professional lighting equipment near the guard post, which was unusual. James began to wonder if he was being filmed for some kind of documentary about the royal guards. As his shift neared its end, James felt relieved. His feet ached terribly, and he was looking forward to sitting down and having a proper meal. Just as he was preparing for the changing of the guard ceremony, the man in the navy suit returned. This time, he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a woman carrying a briefcase and another man with a tablet computer. "Sergeant Mitchell," the man said, reading from the tablet. James was surprised that this stranger knew his name and rank. "Represent a private security firm, and we've been observing your performance today. We're quite impressed with your discipline and professionalism." The changing of the guard proceeded as normal, with James maintaining his stoic expression throughout the formal ceremony. But his mind was racing with questions about these mysterious visitors and why they seemed so interested in him specifically. After 6 years of service, he had never experienced anything like this. When James was finally relieved of duty, he was approached by his commanding officer, who looked both puzzled and intrigued. "Mitchell, there are some people who want to speak with you," he said. "I'm not entirely sure what this is about, but they seem legitimate. They're waiting in the officer's lounge." James quickly changed out of his ceremonial uniform into his regular military dress and made his way to the lounge. His heart was beating faster than usual, and he couldn't imagine what these people wanted with him. Had he done something wrong? Was he in trouble? Or could this be something positive? The officer's lounge was a small, comfortable room where guards could relax between shifts. When James entered, he found the 3 visitors from earlier waiting for him. They stood up as he approached, and the man in the navy suit extended his hand for a handshake. "Sergeant Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to meet with us," the man said with a warm smile. "My name is Robert Harrison, and I work for a consulting firm that specializes in executive protection. We've been hired to identify individuals with exceptional discipline and reliability for a very special assignment." James shook his hand, still confused about what was happening. "I'm not sure I understand, sir. Is this related to my service with the Queen's Guard?" The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. "Actually, yes. We've been researching your background, Sergeant Mitchell. Your service record is exemplary. You've never missed a day of duty, never broken protocol, and you're commanding officers. Describe you as one of the most reliable guards they've ever worked with." James felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. "Thank you, ma'am. I take my duties very seriously." Robert Harrison nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why we're here. We have a proposition for you, something that could change your life completely. But before we discuss the details, I need to ask you a question. How committed are you to your current position? Would you ever consider leaving the Queen's Guard for the right opportunity?" The question caught James off guard. He had never seriously considered leaving his post. This was his dream job, his calling. But something in the way these people spoke made him curious about what they might offer. "I love serving my country and protecting the royal family," he replied carefully. But I suppose I would listen to any serious proposal." The 3 visitors exchanged glances, and James could sense that something significant was about to happen. Whatever these people wanted to discuss, it was clearly much bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Robert Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder with James's name on it. The sight of his personal information in the hands of strangers made James feel both impressed and slightly uncomfortable. These people had clearly done extensive research on him, and he wondered how they had obtained such detailed information about his life and career. "Sergeant Mitchell, what I'm about to tell you must remain completely confidential," Harrison began, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "We represent a client who values privacy above all else. This client is looking for someone with your exact qualifications to head up a personal security detail." James leaned forward slightly, his interest growing. "What kind of client requires this level of security?" The woman who introduced herself as Sarah Chen smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say our client is one of the most recognizable people on the planet. Someone whose every move is watched by millions of people, whose safety is constantly at risk, and who needs protection that goes far beyond what traditional security companies can provide." The 3rd member of their team, a man named David Kumar, activated his tablet and showed James a series of photographs. They showed various high-profile events, celebrity gatherings and business meetings, but all the faces were blurred out. "Our client attends events like these regularly," Kumar explained. "The security challenges are enormous. We need someone who can remain calm under extreme pressure, someone who won't be intimidated by crowds, media attention, or even potential threats." James studied the images carefully. He had protected members of the royal family during public events, so he understood the complexities of high-profile security. "I appreciate your confidence in me, but I should mention that I have no experience in private security. My expertise is specifically in royal protection protocols." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "It's actually one of the reasons we're interested in you. Royal protection is considered the gold standard in personal security. The training you've received, the discipline you've developed, and the discretion you've learned are exactly what our client needs." Sarah Chen pulled out another document from the briefcase. "Before we discuss specifics, we need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. What we're about to tell you is extremely sensitive, and regardless of whether you accept our offer, you must agree to keep this conversation confidential." James examined the legal document carefully. It was more comprehensive than anything he had ever seen, with clauses about confidentiality, non-competition, and severe penalties for any breach of privacy. The seriousness of the document made him realize that whoever these people represented was indeed someone very important and powerful. After signing the agreement, Harrison leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Sergeant Mitchell, our client is Elon Musk." The words hit James like a lightning bolt. Elon Musk was one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX and one of the richest people on the planet. James had read about him in newspapers and seen him on television, but he never imagined he would have any connection to such a figure. "Mr. Musk is expanding his personal security team," Chen continued. "He's been receiving an increasing number of threats, and his current security arrangements are no longer adequate. He needs someone to lead a team that can protect him during his travels, at his various properties, and during public appearances." Kumar showed James more images on his tablet, this time showing SpaceX facilities, Tesla factories, and Musk's various properties around the world. He would be responsible for coordinating security at all of these locations. It's a massive undertaking that requires someone with exceptional organizational skills and attention to detail. James felt overwhelmed by the scope of the responsibility they were describing. "This sounds like it would require a team of dozens of people. I'm just one person." Harrison smiled. "You would be the head of security, but you'd have a substantial team working under you. We're talking about hiring former military personnel, FBI agents, and other elite security professionals. But we need someone to lead them, someone whose judgment we can trust completely." The conversation continued for another hour, with the three consultants explaining the various aspects of the job. James would need to relocate to California, undergo additional training in executive protection, and be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The lifestyle would be demanding, but the experience would be unlike anything he could imagine. "What about compensation?" James asked, though he almost felt embarrassed to bring up money when discussing such an extraordinary opportunity. Sarah Chen smiled and pulled out one final document from the briefcase. She slid it across the table to James, and when he looked at the number written at the bottom, his eyes widened in disbelief. £20 million per year. James stared at the figure, convinced he had misread it. He looked up at the three consultants, who were watching his reaction carefully. "This can't be correct," he said quietly. "It's correct," Harrison confirmed. "Mr. Musk believes in paying top dollar for the best talent. Your salary would be £20 million annually, plus benefits, housing allowances, and performance bonuses. After taxes, you'd be taking home more money in 1 year than most people earn in their entire lifetimes." The room fell silent as James tried to process this information. £20 million was an unimaginable amount of money. He could buy a mansion, travel the world, ensure his family never had to worry about money again. His parents could retire comfortably, his sister could pay off her student loans, and he could live a life of luxury he had never dreamed possible. But as the initial shock wore off, James began to think about what he would be giving up. The Queen's Guard wasn't just a job for him. It was a calling, a tradition that connected him to centuries of British history. He thought about the little girl who had waved at him that morning, about the tourists who traveled from around the world just to see the guards in their ceremonial uniforms. "This is an incredible offer," James said slowly, "but I need some time to think about it." Kumar nodded understandingly. "Of course, this is a life-changing decision. I can give you 48 hours to consider our proposal." Up and handed James a business card. "We understand this is a lot to process, but I want you to know that Mr. Musk specifically requested you after reviewing dozens of potential candidates. He was impressed by your service record and your reputation for integrity." As the three consultants prepared to leave, Sarah Chen turned back to James one more time. "I should mention that this opportunity won't wait forever. Mr. Musk needs to fill this position quickly, and if you decline, we'll have to move on to our second choice immediately." After they left, James sat alone in the officer's lounge, staring at the business card and the salary figure that seemed too good to be true. His mind raced with possibilities and concerns. What would his family think? What would his fellow guards say? Could he really walk away from everything he had worked so hard to achieve? That evening, James called his parents from his small apartment near the base. He couldn't tell them about the specific offer due to the confidentiality agreement, but he asked them hypothetically what they would think if he had an opportunity to leave the military for a private security job. His father was immediately suspicious. "Private security can be dangerous, son. You're safe and respected where you are now. Why would you want to give that up?" His mother was more supportive. "If it's a good opportunity that would make you happy, you should consider it. You've always been so dedicated to your duty, but you deserve to think about your own future too." James spent the entire night walking around London, thinking about his decision. Passed by Buckingham Palace, where other guards were standing, at their posts, just as he had done thousands of times. He thought about the pride he felt in serving his country, the sense of purpose that came with protecting the royal family, and the brotherhood he shared with his fellow guards. But he also thought about the incredible opportunity that had been presented to him, the chance to work with one of the most innovative minds in the world, and the financial security that would transform not just his life, but the lives of everyone he cared about. The next morning, James reported for duty with a heavy heart and a mind full of conflicting thoughts. As he put on his ceremonial uniform, each piece felt more significant than usual. The red tunic that had been tailored specifically for him, the polished brass buttons that caught the morning light, and the iconic bearskin hat that made him instantly recognizable as one of Britain's elite guards. During his morning shift, James found it difficult to maintain his usual focus. His mind kept wandering to the previous day's meeting and the incredible offer that sat before him like a golden ticket to a completely different life. £20 million was more money than he could properly comprehend. He tried to imagine what that kind of wealth could mean for his family, for his future, and for all the dreams he had never dared to pursue. As tourists gathered around his post, James noticed their faces differently than usual. These people had traveled from all over the world to see the Queen's guards. They took photos with him in the background. Their children stared at him with wonder, and elderly visitors spoke about the tradition and history he represented. For many of these people, seeing the guards was the highlight of their visit to London. An elderly man from Japan approached the rope barrier and stood quietly observing James for several minutes. Through an interpreter, the man explained that his grandfather had fought alongside British forces during World War II and had always spoken with great respect about British military traditions. Seeing the Queen's Guard in person was fulfilling, a promise he had made to his grandfather's memory. James felt a deep sense of responsibility and honor in that moment. He wasn't just a security guard. He was a living symbol of British heritage and values. Millions of people around the world looked to the Queen's Guards as representatives of duty, honor, and unwavering commitment. Could he really walk away from that legacy for money, no matter how much it was? During his lunch break, James called his sister Emma, who worked as a teacher in Manchester. Without revealing the specific details of his situation, he asked her about the importance of following personal dreams versus maintaining traditional values. "You've always been the responsible one in our family," Emma told him. "You chose a path that honored our grandfather's military service and made all of us proud. But James, you can't live your entire life just to fulfill other people's expectations. If there's something you really want to do, something that would make you happy, then you should seriously consider it." Emma's words resonated with James more than he expected. He had always been the dutiful son, the responsible brother, the reliable soldier. But what did he want for himself? What were his own dreams and ambitions beyond serving others? That afternoon, James was assigned to a special duty at Buckingham Palace, where a foreign dignitary was visiting. As he stood at attention during the formal ceremonies, he observed the intricate protocols, the precise timing, and the seamless coordination between different security teams. He realized that his years of experience had given him skills that went far beyond simply standing guard. He understood crowd control, threat assessment, protocol management, and crisis response. During the ceremony, James noticed several plainclothes security officers who were clearly not part of the regular palace staff. They moved with the confident efficiency of experienced professionals, and their equipment was more advanced than anything he had seen in government service. One of them caught his eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of professional respect between security personnel. After the ceremony, the same officer approached James during a brief break between duties. "You're Sergeant Mitchell, right?" the man asked quietly. I heard through the grapevine that you might be considering a move to private security. James was surprised that word of his potential career change had already begun to spread. Not sure what you've heard, but I haven't made any decisions yet. The officer smiled knowingly. I made the transition from military to private security 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. The pay is incredible, the work is more varied and interesting, and you get to see parts of the world you never imagined. But I'll tell you this, not everyone is cut out for it. You lose the structure, the brotherhood, and the sense of serving something bigger than yourself. This conversation gave James a new perspective on his decision. It wasn't just about choosing between money and tradition. It was about choosing between two completely different lifestyles and value systems. That evening, James received a call from Robert Harrison, the consultant who had presented Elon Musk's offer. "I hope you don't mind me checking in," Harrison said. "We're very eager to hear your thoughts, and Mr. Musk himself has asked about your decision timeline." The idea that Elon Musk was personally interested in his response made James feel both flattered and pressured. "I'm still considering all aspects of the offer," James replied carefully. "It's a significant life change that requires thorough consideration." Harrison's tone became more urgent. "I understand. But I should let you know that we've received some interest from other candidates. Mr. Musk values quick decision-making, and he's beginning to wonder if your hesitation indicates a lack of genuine interest in the position." After hanging up, James felt frustrated by the pressure tactics. If this job was truly meant for him, shouldn't he be allowed the time to make such an important decision properly? The pushiness made him question whether this opportunity was as perfect as it had initially seemed. James spent that evening researching Elon Musk online, reading about his business practices, his treatment of employees, and his reputation as a demanding boss. He found mixed reviews. Some former employees described working for Musk as the most challenging but rewarding experience of their careers. Others spoke about unrealistic expectations, constant pressure, and a work environment that demanded complete dedication at the expense of personal relationships and mental health. The more James learned, the more complex his decision became. Working for Elon Musk would certainly be exciting and lucrative, but it would also mean entering a world where he would be completely dependent on one person's approval and satisfaction. In the Queen's Guard, he served an institution that had existed for centuries and would continue long after he was gone. With Musk, he would be serving an individual whose moods and decisions could change everything overnight. James also considered the practical aspects of the job. Moving to California would mean leaving behind everything familiar: his family, his friends, his culture, and his country. He would be starting over in a foreign environment, working with people he didn't know, protecting someone whose lifestyle and values might be completely different from his own. As he walked through London's streets that night, James passed by several landmarks that held special meaning for him. The Tower of London, where generations of guards had served before him. Westminster Abbey, where he had participated in ceremonial duties during important state occasions. These places weren't just tourist attractions. They were part of his identity and his connection to something larger than himself. James realized that his decision wasn't just about choosing between two jobs. It was about choosing between two versions of himself. One version would pursue wealth, an adventure in a foreign land, working for one of the world's most powerful men. The other version would continue serving his country and maintaining traditions that connected him to generations of dedicated servicemen. As midnight approached, James knew he was running out of time. Tomorrow, he would need to give his answer to Harrison and his team. The £20 million was still an incredible temptation, but other factors were beginning to weigh more heavily in his mind. He thought about the little girl who had waved at him, the elderly Japanese man honoring his grandfather's memory, and all the people who looked to the Queen's Guards as symbols of something noble and enduring. He thought about his own grandfather's military service and the pride his family had always taken in his dedication to duty. But he also thought about Emma's words about not living his entire life to fulfill other people's expectations. Was staying in the Queen's Guard really what he wanted, or was it simply what was expected of him? The weight of the decision pressed down on James as he prepared for what might be his final night as a Queen's Guard. still uncertain about which path would lead to a life he could truly be proud of. James woke up on his final day of decision-making with a strange sense of clarity. He had spent the entire night thinking, and somewhere in the early morning hours, he had begun to understand what truly mattered to him, as he prepared for what might be his last day as a Queen's Guard. Every action felt more meaningful than usual. The morning routine that he had performed thousands of times before took on a ritualistic quality, polishing his boots until they gleamed like mirrors, pressing his uniform until every crease was perfect, and carefully positioning his bearskin hat at precisely the correct angle. These weren't just preparations for work. They were acts of respect for the institution he served and the traditions he embodied. As James walked to his post at Windsor Castle, he noticed details about his surroundings that he had taken for granted for years. The way the morning light reflected off the ancient stone walls, the sound of his boots echoing in the courtyard, and the sense of history that permeated every corner of the royal residence. This wasn't just a workplace. It was a living museum, where he played a vital role in preserving centuries of British heritage. During his morning shift, James experienced an unusual number of meaningful interactions with visitors. A young boy with autism, who had been fascinated by the guards for years, stood quietly observing James for over an hour. His mother explained that seeing the Queen's Guards was her son's greatest passion, and he had memorized every detail about their uniforms and duties. When the family finally left, the boy gave James a small wave, and though James couldn't respond visibly, he felt a profound connection to this child, who found comfort and joy in the traditions he represented. An elderly woman from Scotland approached with her granddaughter, sharing stories about her late husband who had served in the Royal Regiment. She spoke about how much it meant to her family to see young men like James carrying on the proud traditions that her husband had died defending during World War II. The granddaughter listened with rapt attention, clearly inspired by both her grandmother's stories and James's dignified presence. These interactions reminded James that his role extended far beyond security duties. He was a living symbol of continuity, honor, and service that connected past, present, and future generations. People from around the world came to see the Queen's Guards, not just as tourist attractions, but as representatives of values that seemed increasingly rare in modern society. Around midday, James received an unexpected visit from his commanding officer, Colonel Williams, who had been monitoring the situation with the private security offer, while the details were supposed to be confidential. Word had spread through the military channels that James was considering leaving the service. "Walk with me, Sergeant," Colonel Williams said during James's break. They strolled through the castle grounds, away from the crowds and cameras. "I understand you've received an interesting job offer." James felt uncomfortable discussing the situation, but he respected his commanding officer too much to lie. "Yes, sir. It's a significant opportunity, but I haven't made any decisions yet." Colonel Williams nodded thoughtfully. "I won't pretend to know the details. I imagine it involves considerably more money than Her Majesty's government can offer." "The compensation is substantial, sir," James admitted. "Money is important, Sergeant. Any man who says otherwise is either lying or has never had to worry about paying bills." "But I want to share something with you that I learned during my own career." Colonel Williams stopped walking and faced James directly. 30 years ago, I received an offer to leave the military for a private security company. The money was incredible, and I seriously considered it." James listened intently as his commanding officer continued. "What stopped me wasn't loyalty or tradition, though those mattered. What stopped me was realizing that in private security, you're ultimately working for one person's interests. You're protecting their wealth, their lifestyle, their personal agenda. In the Queen's Guard, you're serving something much larger. You're protecting an institution that represents the best values of our nation." The colonel's words resonated deeply with James. He had been so focused on the personal aspects of his decision that he hadn't fully considered the broader implications of whom he would be serving. "I'm not telling you what to decide," Colonel Williams added, "but I want you to understand that your service here isn't just a job. You're part of something that has endured for centuries and will continue long after we're both gone. There's a kind of immortality in that service that money can't buy." After their conversation, James returned to his post with a new perspective on his situation. As he stood guard, he began to think about legacy and meaning in ways he had never considered before. What kind of man did he want to be? What values did he want to embody? What would he be proud to tell his future children about the choices he had made? The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge that would test everything James had been thinking about. A group of aggressive protesters had gathered outside the castle, demanding changes to various government policies. They began shouting at the guards, trying to provoke reactions, and filming everything with their phones in hopes of creating viral content. One particularly hostile protester approached James directly, screaming insults about the monarchy and making personal attacks about his appearance and intelligence. The man was clearly trying to make James break protocol, to get him to react or respond in a way that would be embarrassing to the institution he represented. James remained perfectly still and expressionless, drawing on years of training and discipline. But inside he felt a profound sense of pride in his ability to maintain dignity under pressure. This was exactly the kind of situation where his training and character mattered most. He wasn't just protecting a building or a person, he was protecting the reputation and honor of something much larger than himself. When the protesters finally left without getting the reaction they wanted, James realized something important about himself. He didn't just wear the uniform. He'd become everything it represented. The discipline, the honor, the commitment to service. These weren't just job requirements. They were part of his identity. That evening, James called Robert Harrison to arrange a final meeting. He had made his decision, and he wanted to deliver it in person rather than over the phone. Harrison seemed pleased by the request. Probably assuming that James was ready to accept the offer, they met at the same hotel where their first conversation had taken place. Harrison, Sarah Chen, and David Kumar were all present, and they had prepared additional documents and information packets about James's potential new life in California. "Gentlemen, Miss Chen," James began formally, "I want to thank you for the incredible opportunity you've presented to me. The offer to work for Mr. Musk is truly extraordinary, and I'm honored that he would consider me for such an important position." Smiled broadly, reaching for his briefcase. "We're delighted that you've decided to join our team, Sergeant Mitchell. Mr. Musk will be thrilled to hear the news." James held up his hand gently. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood my purpose in requesting this meeting. I've decided to decline the offer." The silence that followed was profound. The three consultants stared at James as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Harrison was the first to recover his composure. "I'm sorry, did you say you're declining?" Harrison asked, clearly struggling to process this response. "Offering you £20 million per year? That's generational wealth." "Sergeant, are you certain you understand what you're turning down?" James nodded calmly. "I understand exactly what I'm turning down, and I've never been more certain of a decision in my life." Sarah Chen leaned forward, her professional demeanor slipping slightly. "Can you help us understand your reasoning? Is there something about the offer that concerns you? Are you looking for more money?" "It's not about money," James replied. "It's about purpose, meaning, and knowing who I am and what I stand for." The three consultants exchanged confused glances, clearly struggling to comprehend how anyone could turn down such an extraordinary financial opportunity. David Kumar was the first to break the stunned silence that followed James's declaration. "Sergeant Mitchell, I think you may need more time to consider this decision. £20 million is more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Perhaps you should discuss this with your family, with a financial advisor, with someone who can help you understand the magnitude of what you're refusing." James remained calm and composed, his military training evident in his posture and demeanor. "I appreciate your concern, but I've given this decision more thought than any other I've ever made. I know exactly what I'm turning down, and I know exactly why I'm doing it." Robert Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to something resembling frustration. "Help me understand this, Sergeant. You're choosing to remain in a job that pays you less in a year than our offer would pay. You in a single day? You're choosing to live in military barracks instead of a mansion in California. You're choosing to stand guard in the rain and cold, instead of traveling the world with one of the most innovative minds of our generation. What could possibly be worth more than financial security for the rest of your life? James took a deep breath before responding, knowing that his answer would likely sound incomprehensible to these people who measured success purely in financial terms. What I do isn't just a job, Mr. Harrison. When I put on that uniform, I become part of something that has existed for centuries. I represent values that millions of people around the world still believe in: duty, honor, service, and commitment to something greater than personal gain. Sarah Chen shook her head in disbelief. But you could serve those same values in private. Security. You'd be protecting someone who is working to advance human civilization, to explore space, to develop sustainable energy. Isn't that serving a greater good? Perhaps James acknowledged. But I would be serving one man's vision of the greater good, subject to his whims and dependent on his continued approval. In the Queen's Guard, I serve an institution that transcends any individual, including the monarch herself. I serve the idea of duty itself. Kumar pulled out his tablet and showed James photographs of luxury homes, exotic travel destinations, and expensive cars. Think about what this money could mean for your family. Your parents could retire immediately. Your sister could pay off her student loans and buy her own home. You could ensure that your future children never have to worry about money for education, health care, or anything else they might need. The mention of his family hit James harder than he expected. He had indeed thought about how the money could transform their lives, how he could give them security and opportunities they had never imagined. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. Was he being selfish by choosing principle over practical benefits for the people he loved most? You're right that this money could help my family enormously, James admitted. But what would I be teaching them about values and priorities? That everything has a price. Duty and honor are luxuries that can be abandoned when enough money is offered? My grandfather served in the Royal Navy for 30 years, and he never became wealthy. But he became something more important. He became a man of unshakable character. That's the inheritance I want to pass on to future generations. Harrison's frustration was becoming more apparent. Sergeant, with all due respect, character doesn't pay for medical bills or put food on the table. Your grandfather lived in a different era, when people could afford to be idealistic. This is the real world, where financial security matters more than abstract concepts like honor. James felt a flash of anger at the dismissive way Harrison spoke about his grandfather's service. But his training helped him maintain his composure. Mr. Harrison, you're absolutely right that this is the real world. And in the real world there are still people who believe that some things matter more than money. I'm one of those people. Sarah Chen tried a different approach, her voice becoming softer and more personal. James, may I call you James? I understand the appeal of tradition and service. I really do. But you're a young man with your whole life ahead of you. Don't you want to see the world? Don't you want to experience things that most people only dream about? Don't you want to have the freedom that comes with financial independence? James considered her words carefully before responding. I appreciate your concern for my future, Miss Chen. But I've already seen more of the world than most people. Just through my service with the Royal Guards, I've met dignitaries from dozens of countries, participated in state ceremonies that most people only see on television, and been part of events that will be remembered in history books. As for freedom, I've found more freedom in knowing who I am and what I stand for than I could ever find in a bank account. Kumar made one final attempt to change James's mind. What if we could arrange for you to meet with Mr. Musk personally? He's a remarkable man, truly visionary. Perhaps if you could understand his mission, his goals for humanity, you might see this opportunity differently. James shook his head gently. I have no doubt that Mr. Musk is an extraordinary person doing important work. But this isn't about him or his character. This is about me and my path in life. I've found my calling. And it's not in private security, no matter how prestigious or lucrative it might be. The three consultants sat in stunned silence for several minutes, clearly struggling to process James's decision. Finally, Harrison gathered up his documents and closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. Sergeant Mitchell, I have to say, this is the first time in my career that anyone has turned down an offer of this magnitude. I hope you don't come to regret this decision. I won't regret it, James replied with quiet confidence. I want you to know that I'm genuinely grateful for the opportunity and the confidence you showed in me. I hope Mr. Musk finds the right person for this position." As the three consultants prepared to leave, Sarah Chen turned back one more time. "James, I have to ask, is there any amount of money that would have changed your mind? 10 million more? 50 million? What would it have taken?" James smiled for the first time during the entire conversation. "Ms. Chen, you're asking the wrong question. The right question isn't what amount of money would change my mind. The right question is, what would it take for me to abandon my principles? And the answer to that question is simple. There is no amount." After they left, James sat alone in the hotel lobby for a long time, reflecting on what had just happened. He had turned down more money than he could spend in several lifetimes, and he felt completely at peace with his decision. For the first time since this whole situation began, he felt truly free. James walked back to the base that evening with a lightness in his step that he hadn't felt in days. When he arrived, he found several of his fellow guards waiting for him. Word had somehow spread about his decision, and they wanted to congratulate him on choosing to stay. "Mitchell, you absolute legend," said Sergeant Thompson, one of his closest friends in the unit. "When I heard about your decision, I knew you'd made the right choice. Takes real courage to turn down that kind of money." Another guard, Corporal Davies, clapped James on the shoulder. "My wife heard about what happened through the Military Wives Network. She said to tell you that you're an inspiration, that it gives her hope that there are still people who can't be bought." The support from his colleagues meant more to James than he had expected. These were men who understood the sacrifices that came with their chosen profession, who had also chosen service over personal gain, and who recognized the courage it took to stay true to one's principles when faced with enormous temptation. That night, James called his family to tell them about his decision. His parents were initially shocked by the amount of money he had turned down, but they ultimately expressed pride in his choice. His father, in particular, seemed moved by James's commitment to the values that had guided their family for generations. "Son, I'll be honest," his father said over the phone. "When I first heard about the money involved, I thought you'd be crazy not to take it. But after thinking about it more, I realized that what you've done takes more strength than accepting ever would have. You've shown that you know who you are and what matters to you. That's worth more than any amount of money." His sister Emma was equally supportive, though she admitted to being amazed by the sum he had refused. "James, I always knew you were principled, but this is next level. You've just proven that integrity isn't just something you talk about. It's something you live by, even when it costs you everything." As James prepared for bed that night, he felt a profound sense of satisfaction and peace. He had faced the biggest test of his character and values, and he had emerged stronger and more certain of his path than ever before. Tomorrow, he would put on his red tunic and bearskin hat once again. He would stand guard with renewed pride and purpose. The decision he had made would soon become known far beyond the military community, and his response to Elon Musk's offer would inspire people around the world who were struggling with their own choices between money and meaning, between personal gain and principled service. 3 weeks after James declined Elon Musk's extraordinary offer, word of his decision began to spread beyond the military community in ways he never anticipated. It started when Colonel Williams mentioned the story during a military leadership conference, emphasizing it as an example of modern soldiers maintaining traditional values in an increasingly materialistic world. One of the attendees at that conference was a journalist who specialized in military affairs. Intrigued by the story of a soldier turning down £20 million to remain a Queen's Guard, she began investigating the details. Though the original offer had been confidential, enough people knew pieces of the story that she was able to piece together the basic facts. James first learned about the media attention when his commanding officer called him into his office on a Tuesday morning. "Sergeant Mitchell, I'm afraid your decision has attracted some unwanted attention," Colonel Williams said, holding up a newspaper. "There's an article about you in today's Times." James read the headline with growing alarm. "Royal Guard turns down £20 million offer from tech billionaire." The article was respectful and portrayed him in a positive light, but it revealed details about his personal life and his decision that he had never intended to share publicly. "Sir, I never spoke to any journalists," James said, feeling concerned. "About the breach of confidentiality, I know you didn't," the colonel replied. "But word has a way of getting out, especially when it involves such an extraordinary situation. The good news is that the coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. The bad news is that you're about to become much more famous than any serving guard should be." Colonel Williams was right. Within hours of the first article's publication, a story was picked up by news outlets around the world. Social media exploded with discussions about James's decision, with people debating whether he was admirably principled or foolishly naive. The hashtag principled guard began trending globally. And James found himself at the center of a worldwide conversation about values, money, and integrity. The attention was overwhelming and initially unwelcome. James had never sought fame or recognition. He had simply made what he believed was the right decision for himself. Now, photographers waited outside the base. Journalists attempted to interview his family members, and strangers on the street recognized him when he was out of uniform. But as the days passed, James began to understand the positive impact his story was having on people around the world. He received thousands of letters and emails from individuals who said his decision had inspired them to reconsider their own choices and priorities. Parents wrote to thank him for giving them an example to share with their children about the importance of integrity. Young people, facing their own moral dilemmas, reached out for advice about choosing principles over profit. One letter particularly moved James. It came from a teenager in Australia, whose father had offered him money to quit school and work in the family business. The boy had been struggling with the decision until he heard about James's choice to turn down Elon Musk's offer. "Your story helped me realize that some things are more important than money," the teenager wrote. "I'm staying in school because I want to become the kind of person who stands for something, just like you do." The international attention also brought unexpected opportunities. James was invited to speak at schools, universities, and leadership conferences about integrity and decision-making, though he initially declined most invitations, preferring to focus on his duties. He eventually began accepting a few speaking engagements where he could share the lessons he had learned about staying true to one's values. During one particularly memorable speech at Oxford University, James addressed a room full of students who were preparing to enter careers in business, politics, and technology. Many of them would likely face their own choices between financial gain and personal principles. "I want to be clear about something," James told the students. "Not suggesting that money is evil or that everyone should turn down lucrative opportunities. What I'm saying is that you need to know who you are and what you stand for before those opportunities arise. Because when they do come, and the pressure is enormous, it's too late to figure out your values," he continued. "The easy thing would have been to take the money. Everyone would have understood that choice. The difficult thing was to really examine what mattered most to me and to have the courage to act on those convictions, even when it cost me everything I could have gained." The speech was recorded and shared widely online, further amplifying James's message about the importance of character and integrity in an increasingly complex world. Meanwhile, James learned that Elon Musk had eventually hired a former Secret Service agent for the security position, reportedly at an even higher salary than what had been offered to. James, the new hire, had extensive experience in executive protection and was considered one of the best in the field. James felt confident that Musk had found the right person for the job, someone whose background and motivations were better aligned with the demands of private security. 6 months after declining the offer, James received an unexpected letter. It came from Elon Musk himself, written on personal stationery rather than corporate letterhead. The letter was brief but thoughtful. "Sergeant Mitchell, I wanted to write to express my respect for your decision to decline our offer. While I was initially puzzled by your choice, I've come to understand and admire the principles that guided you. Your commitment to duty and service is admirable, and I have no doubt that the Queen's Guard is fortunate to have someone of your character in their ranks. I hope our paths cross again someday under different circumstances. Best regards, Elon Musk." The letter meant more to James than he had expected. It represented a recognition that his decision while perhaps incomprehensible from a purely financial perspective, was worthy of respect from someone whose opinion carried significant weight in the business world as time passed. Back into his regular duties with a renewed sense of purpose and satisfaction, the global attention gradually died down, though he continued to receive occasional letters from people who had been inspired by his story. He had become in many ways a symbol of something increasingly rare in modern society, someone who could not be bought, whose principles were not negotiable, and who had chosen meaning over money when faced with the ultimate test. James's story became part of Queen's Guard lore, told to new recruits as an example of the kind of character and integrity the service demanded. But more broadly, it became a reminder that in a world where everything seemed to have a price, there were still individuals who believed that some things were priceless. Years later, when James looked back on that pivotal moment in his life, he never once regretted his decision. He had discovered something about himself that no amount of money could have provided, the knowledge that he was exactly who he wanted to be. A man whose word was his bond, and whose principles were unshakable. The little girl who had waved at him on that first day continued to visit the palace with her family, always looking for the guard who had become famous for choosing honor over wealth. And James, still standing at his post with the same dignity and commitment he had always shown, remained a living example that some things in life were truly beyond price. His powerful response to Elon Musk's offer had indeed gone viral, but not in the way anyone might have expected. In a world increasingly driven by material success and financial gain, James Mitchell had reminded millions of people that character, integrity, and purpose were still values worth standing for, no matter what the cost.